Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of A.IdlePodcast, the podcast where I do weekly book reviews. This week, I read The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. Released in 2016, this romance fiction novel surrounds Lucy Hutton's conflicting relationship with professional rival Josh Templeman. Sally Thorne exposes the nuances around the yin and yang theory. Now, fun fact, the film adaptation will be released tomorrow, December 10th, starring Lucy Hale and Austin Stowell. And I was actually looking for showings for this, but I think it's having a limited theater release and it should be streaming on, I don't know which platforms at this point, but I think you'll probably be able to rent it on like Amazon Prime or something like that. So just keep a lookout for that. I know I am looking forward to seeing how this plays out on the screen. Now, just some background information. First of all, first and foremost, Sally Thorne is a fellow Virgo. She was born September 10th, which is 3 days after my birthday, September 7th. So she automatically has cool points. She's a best-selling author who has previously released 99% Mine and will soon release Second First Impressions. The Hating Game was her debut, and it was published by William Morrow, which is a HarperCollins imprint. The structure of this book is very straightforward. There are 28 chapters, about 360 pages. I found that each chapter was about 10 to 12 pages, so there wasn't a lot of variety in terms of length of the events being described. And this story is told through the eyes of Lucy Hutton. So she is our narrator. Because of that, she's the first character we are going to touch on. Now, this book, as you can probably already tell from the summary on the back, it really is about Lucy, who is our protagonist, and Josh, who is the antagonist. So we're going to touch on those two, and then we're going to hit on the company that they work for, that playing a major part in the story and is ultimately a character in itself. So Lucy's personality is, I would say, artsy, meaning she lives by feeling and not by procedure. She's also carefree. An example would be the state of her apartment, which contains a normal amount of mess, I would say. Dirty clothes, dirty dishes, but still livable. And she also outwardly expresses her emotion. So she's an open book for anger, irritation, happiness, love. People are able to read her face and understand what it is that she is feeling. And most importantly, she is the driving decision maker in her life. Her motivation stems from love and passion. Publishing is her dream profession, and that is why she makes a lot of the decisions that she makes in this book, because of her dream, to be at the top of a publishing company. Her character arc, however, is to kind of jump from this pushover image, specifically in the professional field, to someone who is sturdy and direct with their subordinates. In her personal life, I would say her goal, or not her goal, but her obstacle, is to move from being someone who operates with blinders on. And by blinders, I mean like you're looking in one direction. You're not taking into account everything that is happening around you. And so essentially what Lucy has done is created a narrative in her mind, and she has already decided who Josh is. And so any detail that dissuades from that Josh that she knows is not acknowledged. So she is tasked with, opening her eyes to possibilities that she never had thought of before. Now, Josh, being the antagonist, is kind of the exact opposite. His personality can be described as simply type A. He is operating under textbook efficiency. And when things don't go that way, he has a lot of impatience. And he's, bound to have that impatience because in the real world, things do not move by, the set rules that you learn about in school. He's very organized. His desk is very cleanly. Everything has a place and everything is in its place. He has also structured his eating schedule. He has a very rigid, what he's going to eat for each day of the week, as well as a in-depth workout routine. So this is someone who takes pride in the way that they present themselves, but also the upkeep that it takes to get to a certain level of perfection. Now, he is emotionally veiled. You really can't read his thoughts on his face. And adding on to that, when in the workplace, which a good portion of this book takes place, he is the type of person that is super professional and operating on that idea of efficiency. He's not taking into account other people's feelings or his own even. And honestly, I would say that this Drake lyric really describes him. Jealousy is just love and hate at the same time. This man, it seems on the surface that he has no patience for anything, but later on we find out a little bit differently. But I think that he is someone who has this internal battle going on with himself. And even though he's described as the exact opposite to Lucy, I think that he has a lot of love and hate within himself, which combines into this, this person being jealous of the things going on around him and making him feel like he can't, experience those things. He is motivated by fear of failure, for example. And this is due to the fact that he quit his medical profession, and thus he is finding the value in creating his space in the publishing world. And so because he has that scar still there from, leaving this lifelong dream of being a doctor, it's very difficult for him to accept anything less than perfection when it comes to publishing, because he has to make his decision make sense. He has to make that I don't want to say sacrifice, but that abandonment of being a doctor. He has to make that, make logical sense. And the only way to do that is to become super successful in publishing. But he's also motivated by pleasing his parents. He's trying to live up to the standards that are set by his father. So when we talk about character arc for him, he's really tasked with kind of jumping from cold to caring to showing some type of emotion. Also finding his voice amongst his family. That's a really big one that we don't really get to until probably the second half of the book. But I would say that you could arguably say that he's already a nice person. It's just that we're able to peel back the layers with the progression of the plot. So, because we're seeing everything through Lucy's eyes, we don't know what's going on, behind his personality until a little bit later. And lastly, Bexley and Gammon is the publishing company with which Lucy and Josh work for, but it's also the names of the CEOs. So a little background information, Bexley and Gammon were two separate companies that had to merge together due to, financial issues. And these two companies are, like Lucy and Josh, polar opposites, and the way that they do things is very different. The way that the two CEOs do things is different. But when we combine them together, as a company, it kind of reflects, Lucy and Josh and why they are the way that they are, the work environment that they chose to come into. But it also, the company represents the value in both ways of thinking. The company's arc is to move from two separate subgroups to a healthy working environment of both. And the way that they do that is by going out on the bonding event to the paintball place. Okay, so first theme, I tried to find the best way to say this. There are many ways to describe this concept, but it came down to the theme of contrasting approaches. So this is kind of the idea that opposite ways of thinking, it can create a harmonious outcome when it's mixed appropriately. The first example we get of this is love and hate. Through Lucy's words, on the first 2 pages, she's setting the tone for the entire book. She's saying that essentially from this point on, things are either black or white. It's either love or hate. But these emotions are so far away from each other that they're almost the same thing. As she discusses, it takes so much effort to hate someone and to continually hate them, to tell the world that you hate them, that you're putting in the same energy that you would if you were saying, I love this person, and the similarities between you reacting to each emotion. When we get a little further into the backstory of B&G, the publishing company, we find that they also operate kind of with a left and a right brain approach. So the left brain, if anyone needs a refresher from psychology class, is responsible for logic and thinking and facts, whereas the right brain is seen as the artsy side, the intuition, the imagination. And that's kind of, it describes the two former publishing companies to a T. And so obviously when you put those together, everyone's not used to operating on the same even timeline as they were before, but now they have to mix both philosophies together. An immediate example of that would be the approach to selling books. Some employees just love books and they want to put quality work out there. Some employees are focused on selling books. What are the numbers looking like? How much profit are we going to make? And you could arguably say that there's room for that on every team. Every company has these two ways of thinking, but the key is to take both of those things into account and then find, the best place for the company as a whole. So obviously Lucy and Josh kind of represent contrasting approaches to a T. If you didn't notice, their personalities are, very different. Their motivations are very different. But even physically, it's implied over and over again that Lucy is very short and she's kind of normally toned, not really the working out type, whereas Josh is super tall and super muscular. Their families are also very different. Whereas Lucy's parents can be seen as supporting characters, literally, with the way that they show her love and encourage her decisions, Josh's parents are kind of like side characters that they're overachievers who value their definition of success over understanding what their son is going through. Okay, so the next theme is sacrifice, and more specifically, sacrificing for love. So the idea that you have to give up something you deeply want right now in the present for something that you're going to need forever. This can also be seen as, sacrificing something will put you on a better path than what you were on before. There are several examples of sacrifice throughout this book. One being Lucy's mother giving up her dream of becoming a journalist in order to marry her father and start the family business. And this is parallel to what Lucy is struggling with her professional desires and her personal life. But it's almost like that paradox of, her mother was very into writing and probably could have been the best of the best, but if she would have did that, then Lucy wouldn't be here. So you kind of have to look at things for the pros and the cons, but of course you won't know how things turn out until, you travel into the future. I do have another sacrifice example here, and I was going to say it and give you guys a spoiler alert, but I won't do that. I'll let you enjoy, the plot. But there is another example of sacrifice that will give away a lot, but I'm not going to say it. Okay, second to last theme here is power. So, power in this plot really alludes to the professional positions of the characters. So both of these characters have the same position in the company. They are essentially right below the CEOs. And again, there are two CEOs. So there are two, I don't even know if they define what their positions are. I would say executive assistant, but I think it's a little bit like more in depth than that. But they're right there. So they're both neck and neck. Now, for both characters and side characters, the position a person is holding in the workplace determines their worthiness and their respectability. There's this new position that is coveted by both Lucy and Josh that will give them a promotion, and more importantly, put one of them in charge of the other. And so that's kind of the big motivation for both characters that's introduced in the first act. But what we find though is on their quest to power and to get this position and them just hating each other, I will say that that's a very lethal combination, power and hate, and it will have you out here acting crazy. And they were acting crazy, and I cannot believe that this could ever happen in the real world, because they just were out here being real wild. And even in the trailer for the movie, you can kind of see like how they're interacting with each other. It's very childish, and I'm going to touch on that right now with the last theme, communication. See, the thing with Lucy and Josh is that they don't talk to each other. They literally play games. So the hating game is how they communicate, and that's the title of the book. But it's not them saying, "Oh, I hate you." It's them insulting each other and threatening each other. Back and forth, constantly. But they also play the staring game, or the complimenting game, or the HR game. All of it's childish, all of it, and it's a mess, and it's so unprofessional, but this is the way that they talk to each other. However, again, I don't know how many times I have to say this with these fiction books. When it all comes down to it, direct communication would have avoided the entire plot, and it would have given our characters the ending that they deserve and the ending that they ultimately get to in the end of the book, but a lot faster. And it would have, kind of not put them through so much trauma with each other. They just were out here acting crazy. I don't know. Okay, so I believe the author intention of this book was to showcase this romantic story from one perspective specifically, because had we gotten the perspective of Josh, it would have kind of lessened the tension of the plot, and it would have moved the story along a lot faster. Either that, or it would have dragged on because the audience would have been able to put a few things together. So I think it was certainly intentional that we just got Lucy's perspective, but also just creating a contemporary romance for millennials that are navigating the workforce and romantic relationships right now. A lot of us are, just getting out of college, but also starting to form those relationships that are going to last, and marriage and kids and stuff like that. It's implied that Lucy and Josh are both in their 20s. It's not actually explicitly stated, but there were a few context clues there that you can kind of put together. But there's also a discussion on the modern competition in the workplace. This whole idea of layoffs and mergers and the implications of the people that are let go, the people that are staying on, the people that are being internally promoted, or competition within the company. This is all something that, has always been a part of work life, But now it seems like more than ever, with the economy going through so many different ups and downs, and even the students that were just graduating when the 2008 recession hit, this is something that they can kind of relate to. And there's not an emphasis on that, but it's something that's mentioned in the story as a background detail that I think is so real, and it's nice to kind of see it in fiction pieces, because it is happening a lot more than I think everyone wants it to. Just the other day I don't know what company this was. I saw a video. I want to say it was better.com or something like that, where an employee laid off a CEO laid off a lot of employees, like 900 over a Zoom call. Like, how terrible is that, really? But anyway, that's besides the point. So yeah, I think this is something that definitely speaks to millennials specifically, because we're in that kind of weird space of trying to find our place in the professional world, trying to really, lock in our careers, but also where does the work-life balance fall? Because if you go so hard like Lucy and Josh, you don't really have a life. So where's the romance at? So ultimately, I think this is a cute little romance book for singles, definitely. It gets spicy though, so I don't know if there's like a thing on here that says 18 plus, but it does get spicy in this book. I do think it's an interesting commentary on women in the workplace as well, just because there were a few moments with their boss he was just really obnoxiously staring at Lucy. That was so realistic, and I'm glad that it was included, but just to start a conversation. I think above all else though, the main takeaway of this book is your assumptions are just that. You don't know everything, so you can only move off of personal knowledge and feelings and leave it at that. And communicate with the people around you so you don't end up living the life of a Hallmark character. That's it. Simple. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode. I will see you guys next week. I hope everyone has a lovely weekend and stays super warm. Thanks.